Welcome to 13th and 14th century Italy. We're going to be catching up right where the Middle Ages are ending. So in Italy, things are going to be changing into what we now know as the Renaissance. So first we need to know about what's happening in the world. First of all, Italy is a hive of activity from all of their trade. You can see with this map that they are trading all over the area. This is giving them access to a lot of new and innovative ideas. Unfortunately, this is also going to add to something that is going to be devastating for Italy and the rest of Europe, which is the Black Death or the bubonic plague. This is going to really hit at the end of the 14th century. Italy is also different from the rest of Europe because they are dominated by the papacy and the Holy Roman Empire. The rest of Europe is really focused on landed aristocracy at this time. So Italy is a series of individual city-states. So all of these cities that you see there, Venice, Genoa, Naples, all of those are going to be individual city-states. They're going to have their own navies, their own governments, and they're going to be in cooperation with other city-states and sometimes at war with other city-states. Many of these city-states are republics that are ruled by mercantile oligarchs, which basically means that the merchant class is going to be the ruling class. During this time, we're also going to see a rise in humanism, which is looking to the classical past. So they're going to be looking to Greek and Roman times for inspiration for art, as well as for inspiration with philosophy and virtues. We also need to talk a little bit about the church during this time. This is the Roman Catholic Church that we're talking about. We've got some mendicant orders. These are orders that were founded to minister to lay populations. They're not secluded, they're not retreating from the world. They are meant to go into these population centers and help convert these populations. Now, these are going to be different from the Benedictines. So in Art History 1, when we're talking about the Middle Ages, we're talking a lot about the Benedictine order. So the two main orders that we're going to be talking about here are the Dominicans, founded by Dominic de Guzman in 1216. They were founded to combat heresy and valued classical learning. And the Franciscans, founded by Francis of Assisi in 1209. And they were all about seeing God in the beauty of nature. Also, the Franciscans were the first to set up nativity scenes or creches. They used these to help teach biblical stories. St. Francis died in 1226. 2 years later, he becomes a saint. And we have a basilica built in his honor with frescoes, with Old and New Testament themes. This is what we're seeing here, the Basilica of San Francesco in Assisi. And it's celebrating the achievement of St. Francis. Many different artists worked on it from the 1290s. So this was begun in 1228, again 2 years after he became a saint. This was the upper hall. The lower level held the body of Saint Francis. We have a brick vaulting happening here. We also have Gothic arches. Remember, those are the pointed arches. But we're going to actually focus on this image. This is St. Francis preaching to the birds from that same basilica. So as we've talked about before, St. Francis is known for his love of animals and nature and seeing God in all animals and nature. So just like in the medieval times, this is a very flat image. We have St. Francis there in the central part of the image with a flat disc halo, and we see him bent preaching to the birds that are surrounding him. We have another Franciscan friar behind him. We have a couple of trees, but we really don't have any mid or background to speak of. Here's another piece. This is the altarpiece of Saint Clare. Saint Clare was the woman who began the Franciscan nuns. So she was head of the female equivalent of the Franciscan friars. As you can see, this is very typical of a medieval icon. We have Saint Clare there in the center. She is surrounded by images from her life, death, and miracles. This is Santa Croce in Florence, or Holy Cross. The architect and sculptor Arnolfo di Cambio is, we believe, the architect of this church. It is a basilica-style church. Now remember, this comes from the Roman times. So we're talking about a large rectangular building, very open in the center. In the Roman times, it was for public meetings. In this case, of course, this is a church. And here we can see how the basilica style plan looks. Again, big, rectangular, not much else. Now we're going to actually move to Pisa. We're going to talk about the cathedral and the baptistry, and we're actually going to focus on the pulpits. So this is something new that's happening in the 1200s, is we're starting to have the need to raise the priest so that people can hear his homilies, to hear him preaching. As you could see in some of the basilica-style churches, very large open space. People are standing, not sitting in most of these. And so it's very hard for people to see and sometimes hear the priest. So we need a way to lift him up. So that is what these pulpits are doing. First, we're going to talk about the pulpit that is in the Pisa Baptistry. It is 15 feet high. It is a hexagonal shape, so 6 sides to the pulpit. And you can see we have colored marble columns. We've got sculpture all around, and we've got a main image on each of the 6 sides. Here we can see a better image of that. But we're going to actually zoom in and focus on one image. Here's one of the sculptures. This is Fortitude, the Christian virtue of fortitude. Most likely it is modeled after a Roman image of Hercules with the lion skin. This is what we're actually going to focus on, is the Nativity. This is combining the Annunciation, Gabriel telling Mary that she is about to give birth to the Christ child, as well as the actual birth. Now we see that the reclining Virgin is the largest figure. We see it's very, very crowded image. We have the Virgin as, again, the center. The Christ child is actually behind her, and she's not looking at nor interacting with the Christ child. Down below, we actually have the Virgin here giving the Christ child a bath, and we have Joseph here. And Joseph is kind of looking off into the distance. He's, again, not really interacting. So we have a very crowded, we have a lot of images of people not really interacting. They're just kind of stuck in there. Now we're actually going to compare this to Giovanni Pisano's Nativity. So Niccolo Pisano did his pulpit in 1260. Now, almost 50 years later, we have his son, Giovanni Pisano. He is doing a pulpit as well. This is for the main Pisa Cathedral. So the previous one was the baptistry. Again, it's a separate building. And here is the cathedral. And interestingly enough, Giovanni, like his father, decided to focus one of his sides on the Nativity. We have some of the same imagery, but he's done it very differently. Now we have a lot going on here, but you can see it's a little more spaced out. We have the Virgin. In this case, she's actually interacting with the Christ child. You can see that she's she's peeking at a sleeping child, something new mothers typically do. Then we have down below, we have the Virgin. She's preparing the water, making sure the water's good. She's holding the Christ child. And you can see that Joseph is very involved. He's looking at, interacting with this scene. So we have all of the same images. We have all the same elements, but we're definitely interacting a lot more. It's very much different angles. We've got the sheep over here. We're seeing the tops of sheep as well as the sides of sheep. So it's very much a great example of how art is changing in this very short amount of time. In less than 50 years, we have this huge change between Nicola and Giovanni's nativity scenes on their pulpits for the Pisa Cathedral and Baptistry. And here we've got a comparison between the two. So you can see again Nicola's very large Virgin versus Giovanni's down here. And you can definitely see a difference again in the two. And this is the full version of Giovanni Pisano's pulpit for the Cathedral of Pisa. Now we're going to move to Florence, and we're going to look at the Florence Cathedral. Nicola Pisano's student Arnolfo da Cambio is designing this church. It's replacing a earlier, smaller church. And we start the process in 1296. We have a revised plan by 1357 by Francesco Talenti. Many of these cathedrals, we have multiple artists working on them, and we have people working on these cathedrals for sometimes 100+ years. So by 1367, they decide that they need to have a dome, a large dome, and so they start working on this. Unfortunately, trying to figure out how to make a dome as large as they wanted is creating some issues for them. Remember, in Italy, the baptistry and the campanile or bell tower are separate from the main cathedral. So we can see the baptistry here in the front. Here is the campanile or bell tower, and again, those are separate. Another image. Here is a closer image of the baptistry. This is the baptistry of Florence Cathedral. This was built in the 11th century. St. John the Baptist is the patron saint of Florence. To be baptized in his baptistry meant that an individual not only became a Christian, but also a citizen of Florence. You'll notice that we've got the white, and that's actually a dark green color. That is very unique to Florence. This is the interior of the Florence Cathedral. We have some Gothic arches. Again, remember that is the pointed arches, but this is much simpler from the high Gothic from the late Middle Ages that we had seen previously in just 100 years before. Here's the outline of the Florence Cathedral. Again, we have a basilica-style church, and again, the campanile or bell tower is separate. Now we're going to go back to the baptistry, and we're actually going to focus on the doors. So we're going to go back to the baptistry. That was that smaller octagonal building with the green and white marble, and we're going to look at the doors. Now, I'm going to warn you now that we're going to talk about a couple of different sets of doors, 3 in particular. Make sure to pay attention to the differences between these 3 styles of doors. These are bronze doors. These were created by Andrea de Pisano, no relation to the guys that did the pulpits. These are cast bronze and gilded. There are 28 panels, mostly from the life of St. John the Baptist. These are in Gothic quatrefoil. The Gothic part is the pointy bits. The quatrefoil are the 4 rounded bits, or the 4 lobes. Let's zoom in and talk about a couple of these. This is the baptism of Christ. So we have St. John the Baptist baptizing Christ in the river. So one thing you're going to notice is that we only have the most important figures being represented. We don't have a lot of background. We don't have a lot of extra things. We have John, we have Christ, and we have an angel. We also have the dove of the Holy Spirit that is coming down from the heavens. And as far as background, we have a couple of rocks and skinny trees, but that's it. Just the basics. Next, let's move to the Palazzo della Signora, or Palazzo Vecchio. This is a public governmental building in Florence. This is meant to house the governing council and really serve as a symbol of political independence of the city. This was designed by Arnolfo di Cambio. It has solid stone walls. You're also going to notice that there are very few doors and windows on the first floor. We start getting more windows as we're going up, but that first floor, so it's very much in kind of that military mindset. Some of you might also notice that the tower is a little bit off center. It is not centered purposefully. This is because the tower rested on a foundation of an earlier tower, and because of other buildings, the entire building couldn't be moved, so this was off center because of a previous tower. So this bit up here where you're kind of going up and down, that is called crenellation, and that dates back to castles and other military buildings and the needing for a place to get your bow and arrow ready. You come through, you shoot your arrow, and then you hide back around. Let's switch gears and talk about painting now. Again, we're going to be seeing a lot of very similar items as to the late Middle Ages. This is Madonna Enthroned. This is by Cimabue. He is from Florence. This was housed in the Church of Santa Trinita in Florence. It is 12 feet high, so it is a large altarpiece, very much in the Byzantine style. Remember, the Byzantine style, we had large almond-shaped eyes, we had long, skinny fingers, we had that long nose, very flat, and lots of gold. These are all aspects of Byzantine that you're going to see here in this particular piece. Now you're going to notice there on the very bottom that we've got these 4 figures. These are Old Testament prophets. Also going to notice that the Virgin Mary, she's got on a red gown with a blue veil over that. The red represents the blood of Christ, and the blue represents the heavens. She is oftentimes referred to as the Queen of Heaven. Now, Cimabue taught a guy named Giotto de Bondone. Giotto learned from Cimabue, and we're going to start seeing differences as we're going on. In Giotto's work, again, another Madonna enthroned. So we have a Madonna and Child. We've got angels surrounding, a lot of gold. Still very flat, but we're starting to have a little more three-dimensionality. And part of that is the throne behind Mary. You notice that we're starting to get more three-dimensional quality because of that. Again, this is a very large piece for the Church of All Saints in Florence. This is over 10.5 feet tall. Now let's go to the Scrivengi Chapel in Padua. This is right next to the palace that Paduan banker Enrico Scrivengi built. This is pretty typical of the time. You would have your palace, and you would have a small chapel for your personal use if you were a very wealthy individual. But it's a small one-room building. Barrel vault. Remember, barrel vault is a round arch that's pulled. We have round arches versus the pointed arches that are more Gothic. And on the ceiling, we have a blue field with some gold stars, symbolic of the heavens. On the sides, you're going to notice 3 rows, horizontal rows or registers. These are talking about the scenes from the life of Christ. We're beginning at the altar end of the room with the Annunciation, and end in the Last Judgment at the west end. There's also some stories depicting the life of Mary and her parents. Let's focus in on just a couple of these. We're still talking about Giotto. So Giotto was taught by Cimabue, and he ended up painting a lot of the Scrivengi Chapel, and this is Christ entering Jerusalem. Some of the things you're going to notice here, again, we're still very flat, very little in the way of midground or background. You can argue that we do have those 2 figures climbing those trees in the midground, but those trees are very spindly little things, barely look like that they would hold individuals. You have Christ coming in on his donkey, And you have the people coming out of the walled city. So that's what we see represented there at the very far right side. This is the walled city. So this is what we would term Palm Sunday. Do you want to point out the adorable donkey's face? So we do have a really cute donkey being shown here. We have a lot of figures. Now, one of the things Giotto's trying to do is he's trying to show a crowd of people, but he kind of just ends up layering them. So they look very squished together. That's going to end up changing, so I want to point that out. Now, another piece, again, still in the Scrivengi Chapel in Padua, again by Giotto, and this is the Lamentation. So this is after Christ has been taken down from the cross. We have Mary holding Christ. We have Mary Magdalene at the feet. We have other of his disciples surrounding him. We have the angels that are in despair in the heavens. Again, we have very little in the way of background. We have a large rock and a spindly tree, and that is it. I also want to just point out before we leave this, here on the far left side, that is actually Jonah and the whale. So we have Jonah being swallowed by the whale. It's kind of fun. Little image there. Now let's move to Siena. This is Palazzo Pubblico. This is a governmental building. In Siena, the government was directed by the Nine, or the Nove. These are men chosen by the elite merchants from the city. This is kind of a town hall, a public governmental building. It's a little bit taller than the Palazzo della Signora in Florence, but very similar in a lot of respects. We have those, again, castle-like battlements. We have a little bit more windows and doors, a little more ornamental, but we have a lot of similarities. Okay, next let's talk about Duccio. Duccio di Buoninsegna of Siena. Siena, as a city-state, competed with Florence. They were very confrontational. They competed economically, culturally, and militarily. Now, Siena took Mary as their patron saint after the military victory against Florence in 1260. So the Siena Cathedral is dedicated to Mary. Here we have a small icon of the Virgin and Child by Duccio. It's about 11 inches high, so it's a much smaller piece than we've been talking about. In a lot of respects, it's still very traditional, very Byzantine. We have the gold background, nothing else. We have the traditional Byzantine look on her face, the long skinny fingers, almond-shaped eyes. But we do have a Christ child who is acting like a child, who is playing with his mother's veil. This is part of Duccio's very large altarpiece, Maesta or Majesty. The whole thing is around 7 foot by 13 foot. And you see that it's a digital reconstruction, so some of the pieces have been lost over time. So we're going to break this down and look at a few of the things. There are 43 small scenes. At the base of the panel, it reads, translated, Holy Mother of God, be thou the cause of peace for Siena, and life to Duccio, because he painted thee thus. This was commissioned by the city of Siena in 1308. The top line of the front here, we're going to be talking about Mary's life, death, and ascension into heaven. Then we've got on the bottom, we've got the early life of Mary, and on the back, we have the life of Christ. This large central image right here is another Madonna enthroned image. We have the Virgin and Child. We have her surrounded by saints and angels. Now again, this is very large, so she is just smaller than life size. And this is what the back looks like. So again, you were going to notice that some of the panels are blank. That is because some of the panels have unfortunately been lost over time. There was some work done on the piece at one point, and some of the pieces were taken apart and unfortunately were lost. So this is the center piece that we were just talking about of the Maesta altarpiece by Duccio. Now the point I want to make with this is look at how he's trying to stack the people. So again, we have an artist trying to incorporate a large number of people in a piece. So remember how Giotto did that? We have a little bit different technique for Duccio. And again, we're going to have some of these saints, like here we have Saint John the Baptist here, a few other saints as you can identify some of their things that they're holding. And then after that, we have angels kind of stacking up. The people that are kneeling there on the very front row, these are some local patron saints for Siena. Another one of the panels, this is the Annunciation of the Death of the Virgin. And from the front of the altarpiece, we have two figures. We have the Archangel Gabriel. He is coming back to Mary and telling her that she is about to pass away. So he had originally come to say that she was with child, and now he's come again and said, your time here on earth is about to end. Now, one of the things you're going to notice is that the artist, Duccio, is using architecture to create an idea of depth. We have the lattice boards here on the ceiling. These are helping us create a sense of depth, but other aspects are a little problematic, and that has to do with the book holder here that's holding the Bible for Mary. You notice that, of course, we've got an awkward angle, but that's because the artist is wanting you, the viewer, to see the Bible. But we also have this very awkward stand here at the very bottom. And of course, we have the dais or the bench that Mary is sitting on that's very awkwardly almost floating, as you'll notice here on the very right corner, seems to be kind of floating up above the molding here. So that seems to be very awkward. The other awkwardness is, of course, the angel himself. You notice where his knee is fully within the realm of the door there, but then this foot, his back foot is very much on the other side. We have these kind of awkward moments that are still happening as these artists are attempting to create new ways to create depth. And this is from the back of the altarpiece. This is Christ entering Jerusalem. So we had Giotto's, now we have Duccio's. And you can see that we have basically the same idea. We have Christ on a donkey. He's coming to the city. We have two individuals climbing trees. And you'll notice that these trees are more substantial. You'll also notice that we have a lot more people. And we have, again, a different sense of trying to create a depth of figures. But Duccio did almost get it right, but just kind of missed it a little bit. If you notice that the figures here at the bottom of this large group over here on the right-hand side, the figures on the bottom are actually smaller, and then they go up in size. It should actually be opposite as perspective works, but he kind of got it opposite. We also have kind of an opposite thing happening here with the doorway. Here on, again, the bottom right side, we have some awkwardness with the doorway. But when we come to the city walls, we have some great sense of depth and some really wonderful architecture there. So you notice that, again, these artists are creating new, innovative ways to create this. And just to remind you what Giotto's Christ entering Jerusalem was, much more centered on the figures, much less, there's almost no background. And again, you see how stacked the figures are. Well, this one, the figures are stacked a little better here. And again, we actually have more of a midground and background emerging. So you can see these changes happening between Giotto and Duccio. Now, Duccio trained Simone Martini. He worked in Assisi and later Avignon. This is an altarpiece that he created, the Annunciation. This is about 10 foot by 8.5 foot. We have the Annunciation, which is Archangel Gabriel coming to tell Mary she is with child, and that is flanked by two local saints. You can see one on each side. Now, I want to point out something very difficult to kind of see, and that is the Archangel Gabriel Noticed that there's some letters, very hard to see because of the gold, but there's some letters coming out here. That actually says, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Again, that's translated. But it's a little hard to see because that is also covered in gold leaf, just like the background is. You have Gabriel coming to Mary. We have the white lilies here. White lily is a symbol of purity and becomes a symbol of Mary herself. We also have the dove of the Holy Spirit here in the center coming down. Again, we have the Holy Spirit being represented here. So a quick aside here on guild. So the closest thing for a guild today might be a union. A guild is extremely important beginning in the Middle Ages. This is a group of people who do a similar job or use similar tools. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And these people pay into this guild, and then the guild promises to help your family even if you pass on. And I say about the similar materials because painters actually initially belonged to the pharmacy guild because they used a mortar and pestle to grind their colors. The patron saint of artists is Saint Luke, because it was believed that he painted the first portrait of Mary from a vision. We have ultimately separate guilds for sculptors, and then even specifying of a sculptor of wood versus stone versus metal. Guilds are extremely important for the artists. They're also going to be extremely important because we're going to start seeing them pay for art. We're going to see them pay for public art in a variety of different ways. As we go on, we're going to see that. This is Pietro Lorenzetti's Birth of the Virgin. You're going to notice that we have bits of the frame that are missing. In fact, there's lots of bits of the frame that are missing. So you're just going to have to imagine what it would have looked like. It probably had a much similar frame to Martini's Annunciation, much more elaborate. This is around 6 foot by 6 foot. Now, Lorenzetti was part of the Painters Guild in Florence. He's done a couple interesting things. First of all, he has combined the center and the right panel into one image. So this is the one image, and this is Saint Anne. She has just given birth to Mary. We have Joachim here in the outer area awaiting news of the birth. So here we have Mary, she already has a halo. We have Saint Anne having given birth. But we notice that both of these panels are in the same room. We have a glimpse of some great architecture here through the windows as well. Now we have Pietro's brother Ambrogio Lorenzetti, who did a series of murals for the City Hall in Siena, Palazzo Pubblico. The 9 or the No commissioned these frescoes. There's 4 of them. There's the allegory of good government in the city, good government in the country, bad government in the city, and bad government in the country. So there's 4 murals that he completed as allegories. Unfortunately, some of these have been damaged over time, as we're going to see. So let's zoom in on a couple of these. This is good government in the city, and he is utilizing the architecture to really create a great sense of depth in this piece. So we have this great sense of this bustling city going backwards into space, and we have a fantastic wall here, the wall of the city, separating good government in the city from good government in the country. There's that same wall, and there is the country image. And we've got the rolling hills, and he's trying to utilize the rolling hills again to create a sense of depth. The image of the woman holding the banner here on the very top left side, that is justice. So we've got justice being right there between city and country. The good government in the country mural is considered to be the first true landscape since Roman times. This is Ambrogio Lorenzetti. Pietro was his brother, so we had Pietro doing the Birth of the Virgin, and this is Ambrogio doing these murals. Unfortunately, both of these brothers died of the plague in 1348. Let's talk about the plague for a moment. We have, unfortunately, a period of economic instability starting in the 1340s. This is because of some warfare caused some banks and merchants to go into bankruptcy. We actually have some crop failures and famine. We have these issues, and then in 1348 we have the bubonic plague, or the Black Death. Half of the population of Florence and Siena died in 1348. 1/3 of Europe's population died. From 1347 to 1352, 25 million people died. Historians believe that it began in China and spread through the Silk Road and through trading routes. This is a detail of a piece possibly by Francesco Triani called The Triumph of Death. This was part of a series of frescoes in the Camposanto, which is the cemetery building next to the Pisa Cathedral. It was unfortunately damaged in 1944 with World War II bombing. We have 3 figures in these open coffins in the lower left-hand side, and you can see that they're bloated. They are in periods, they are in decomposition. And we have these wealthy individuals who are riding. You can see they're wealthy just by the garments that they're wearing. Their horses are ornately attired, and they are shocked by this death. This is the whole piece. Again, unfortunately, it was damaged in World War II, but this is the whole piece, and you can see again these figures coming across these bodies. And then, of course, we've got the hermit. We have a hermit up here. And there's also a little inscription on here. Again, translated, it says, "If your mind be aware, keeping here your view attentive, your vain glory will be vanquished, and you will see pride eliminated. And again, you will realize this if you observe that which is written." So the idea is that salvation is through the renunciation of the world, a turn to the spiritual life, not of the beautiful things that these people are wearing. And more in the center part, we have some dead and dying peasants pleading with death. And then on the far right, we have some courtiers enjoying earthly pleasures while death swoops down from the heavens. Here is a map kind of showing how the bubonic plague or Black Death spreads. Now, this is not the only wave of this, so we're going to actually be talking about it for a very, very long time because it keeps coming back. This is Andrea de Firenze, The Way of Salvation. This is the Guidolati Chapel in Santa Maria Novella in Florence, and we have the Dominicans being shown here with their white and black garments. Now, there is a pun because of their garments being black and white. Sometimes they are referred to as Domini Kings, or Dogs of the Lord. It was a favorite pun of the day. And this is the Gate of Heaven guarded by St. Peter. Now, let's move over to Venice real quick. Now, you're going to notice that this building in Venice is very different from the Palazzo Pubblico and some of those other buildings we've seen before. Now, this is a palace, not a public building, but still, there's very different feel and look. We're going to see a lot more of the Islamic influence. This because of, again, the trade. And we're going to have the pointed arches there on the bottom. We're going to see a lot more ornamentation on these as well. Very much more open, less militaristic. We've got the quatrefoil design that we've talked about before. A lot more of Gothic, Byzantine, and Islamic influences there in Venice. All right, now let's move to Milan. In 1395, Giangalizzo Visconti was named the Duke of Milan. He married the daughter of the King of France, and their daughter was married to Louis, Duke of Orleans, the King of France's brother. This is the Milan Cathedral that is being built, started in 1386. Here is a tomb for Bernardo Visconti. This stood over the altar of the church in Milan. This is Giangalizzo's uncle, is Bernardo. This is Bernardo on horseback, So it is an equestrian monument. Equestrian basically just meaning guy on horse. We have a silver and gold leaf in addition to the marble. And this is a book of hours. Now remember, book of hours, this is a devotional book. Typically they're small and to be carried with you. We've got the Psalms in here. In fact, it's opened up to one of the Psalms. And we have King David being portrayed here in beautiful illustration on the right-hand side. That is King David in a letter D, starting off this chapter in Psalms. The shields at the corners are bearing Visconti's emblem. And we have a portrait of Giangolizo at the bottom of the page in profile, and it's set in a frame of sun rays, which is another Visconti emblem. And then we have, surrounding him, we have some stags and dogs, which very much are the idea of hunting is very much something for the elite.